Commander Elena Payload Patel stared at the holographic display of the Drachnid military base and took another sip of her contraband alien coffee. The mission briefing had called it impossible. The Joint Chiefs had labeled it a suicide run. But to the 42nd Interstellar Transportation Corps, impossible was just another word for hasn't been properly approached with caffeine yet. Run it by me one more time, Commander. General Zhang's hologram flickered with barely concealed anxiety. How exactly do you plan to steal a Drachnid phase cannon? It's the size of an office building. Elena grinned, the same grin that had made 3 different alien species add her to their threat assessment databases. Sir, with all due respect, that's exactly why they won't expect us to steal it. Besides, we're not stealing it. We're just optimizing its logistics deployment. The plan was beautiful in its insanity. The Drachnids had created a super weapon capable of facing entire planets out of existence. They'd built it in their most secure facility, surrounded by quantum barriers, plasma fields, and enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. What they hadn't counted on was humanity's most terrifying weapon, bureaucracy. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Elena called out to her logistics officer. Status on Operation Paper Cut. Maria Red Tape Rodriguez looked up from her terminal, her eyes gleaming with mischievous efficiency. All set, Commander. We've filed 17 different requisition forms across 12 alien bureaucracies. According to Galactic logistics protocols, we now technically own everything in a 12-parsec radius due to Form X-227B. Retroactive asset acquisition through clerical error. Elena nodded. It had taken 3 months to plant all the paperwork. The Drachnids, like most militaristic species, had never bothered to fully read the Galactic Commerce Treaty of 2184, specifically the subsections about proper filing procedures for large-scale military hardware transportation. Chief Engineer O'Malley, how are our special modifications coming along? Scene screw loose. O'Malley's face appeared on another screen, covered in grease and wearing what appeared to be parts of an alien coffee maker as improvised armor. Ready to go, Commander. I've upgraded our heavy transport vehicles with those gravity manipulators we borrowed from that Centaurian cargo ship last month. Though we should probably return those at some point. Add it to the list. Elena waved dismissively. The Corps' to-be-returned list was longer than most species' military budgets. The plan would begin at 300 hours, local time, while the night shift of Drachnid bureaucrats processed the mountain of paperwork that had mysteriously appeared in their system. The Corps would make their move. 30 heavy transport vehicles, modified well beyond any reasonable safety regulations, would approach the base under the guise of a routine logistics inspection. Remember, people, Elena addressed her crew, we're not stealing anything. We're conducting a surprise logistics audit with extreme prejudice. If anyone asks, we have all the proper paperwork. If they actually ask to see the paperwork, initiate Protocol Bureaucratic Nightmare. Protocol Bureaucratic Nightmare was the Corps' secret weapon. It involved drowning any opposition in so much red tape that they'd still be filing appeals when the sun went cold. It had once kept an entire alien armada occupied for 6 months trying to verify a parking permit. At exactly 300 hours, the convoy rolled out. Each vehicle had been painted in official-looking colors and plastered with enough official-looking seals to give any bureaucrat a headache. Leading the convoy was Elena's personal command vehicle, affectionately named Reasonable Deniability. The base's outer defenses activated as they approached. Plasma cannons swiveled, targeting systems locked on, and alert klaxons began to wail. Then Rodriguez activated their secret weapon, a continuous stream of automated filing requests, appeals, and regulatory citations, broadcast directly to every command terminal in the base. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Drachnid defense systems, programmed to comply with all proper bureaucratic procedures, began to shut down one by one as their operators were buried under an avalanche of forms requiring immediate attention. "Sir," a junior officer called out, "they're actually filling out the forms." Their entire command structure is paralyzed. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Of course they are. Nobody wants to be the one who didn't file their paperwork properly. Advance the convoy. O'Malley, prepare the gravity manipulators. We're going to show these aliens why humans are the galaxy's undisputed champions of moving things from point A to point B, whether point B wants them or not. The phase cannon loomed before them, a massive structure of dark metal and crackling energy. As O'Malley's gravity manipulators engaged, Elena keyed her comm. All units, execute Operation Clean Sweep, and someone make sure we get a receipt. We're not barbarians, after all. What followed would be recorded in a dozen different alien military databases as the incident we don't talk about. Through a combination of gravity manipulation, creative interpretation of logistics regulations, and what one alien observer could only describe as weaponized audacity, the 42nd Transportation Corps lifted an entire superweapon off its foundation and loaded it onto their convoy, all while maintaining perfect bureaucratic compliance. As they drove away, Elena made sure to file one last piece of paperwork, a customer satisfaction survey, rating their experience at the Drachnid base as moderately satisfactory, with a note about improving their response time to routine logistics inspections. General Zhang's hologram appeared again as they cleared the system's outer marker. Commander Patel, I don't even know what to say. Mission accomplished, sir, Elena replied, already working on her report. Though we may need to requisition some additional storage space, and possibly a really big tarp. The story of how the Human Transportation Corps stole a superweapon with paperwork spread through the galaxy like wildfire. From that day forward, whenever human transport vehicles appeared on the horizon, alien commanders didn't reach for their weapons. They reached for their rubber stamps, hoping desperate compliance would keep the chaos at bay. It never did. Lieutenant Maya, being countered, Chen was having what the Transportation Corps officially classified as a Category 5 crisis. The coffee supplies across 3 major human outposts had dropped below critical levels. While this might seem trivial to other species, anyone who had seen caffeine-deprived humans trying to operate heavy machinery knew better. How bad is it? Commander Patel asked, reviewing the logistics reports in her office aboard the Mobile Command Center Reasonable Deniability. Maya pulled up a holographic chart that was mostly alarming shades of red. We're down to instant coffee, ma'am. The synthetic stuff. Private Jenkins tried some this morning and spent 3 hours trying to convince his truck it was a ballet dancer. Elena pinched the bridge of her nose. After their successful acquisition of the Drachnid phase cannon, now officially listed in their inventory as large decorative paperweight, the Corps had gained a reputation for pulling off the impossible. But this was serious. Options. Well, Maya brought up a star chart. There's a Vexillian trading post in the Carina sector that's known for their exotic beverages. The problem is, they're currently under blockade by the Meridian Consortium over some trade dispute. Elena's eyes lit up with that special gleam that usually preceded incidents requiring multiple diplomatic apologies. Get me Chief Engineer O'Malley and Lieutenant Rodriguez. I think it's time for Operation Espresso Lane. The plan came together over the next hour, sketched out on napkins and random scraps of paperwork. It was exactly the kind of plan that made senior command drink heavily during Corps briefings. 24 hours later, a convoy of 15 Transport Corps vehicles approached the Meridian blockade. Each truck had been modified with what O'Malley called selective visibility enhancements, technology cobbled together from salvaged stealth systems and an old Arcturian disco ball. Remember, Elena's voice crackled over the comm. We're not running a blockade. We're conducting an impromptu logistics efficiency demonstration. The lead vehicle, piloted by Maya, broadcasted on all frequencies. Attention Meridian vessels. This is an official notification of Procedure 7B, Emergency Beverage Resource Allocation. Please refer to subsection 12 of the Galactic Commerce Treaty regarding essential supply chain maintenance. The Meridian ships, sleek and deadly, moved to intercept. Human vessels hold position. This sector is under restricted access protocols. Maya smiled and pressed a button. What followed was a masterpiece of bureaucratic warfare. Every Meridian ship was simultaneously hit with 47,000 separate permit applications, each requiring immediate review according to their own regulations. While the Meridians were drowning in digital paperwork, O'Malley activated the selective visibility enhancements. The convoy didn't exactly turn invisible. Instead, it became what he called bureaucratically negligible. To the Meridian sensors, they registered as a routine data packet transfer. "I can't believe this is working," Maya muttered as they slipped through the blockade. "Oh, it gets better." Rodriguez chimed in from her station. "I just filed a complaint about their blockade with the Galactic Trade Commission. According to Form 339C, they now have to prove they're actually there to maintain the blockade, which they can't do while processing our permit applications." The Vixillian trading post was a sprawling space station that looked like several smaller stations had collided at high speed and decided to make the best of it. As the court convoy approached, they were already implementing Phase 2 of the operation. O'Malley's voice crackled over the comm. "Stealth systems disengage. Activating protocol. Paying customer." The convoy dropped their bureaucratic camouflage and appeared in full transport corps glory, complete with freshly painted diplomatic courtesy stripes, applied approximately 10 minutes ago, with questionably acquired paint. The Vixillian station's comm crackled to life. "Unidentified human vessels, state your business." Elena took over communications, her voice radiating professional charm. "Good day. We're here to make a bulk purchase of your finest coffee beans. We have permits." The last three words carried the subtle threat that they were fully prepared to prove it with overwhelming documentation. The Vixillians, being shrewd traders, recognized both an opportunity and the telltale signs of humans who were definitely going to acquire coffee one way or another. Negotiations were swift and surprisingly legitimate. Elena had insisted on actually paying this time, if only to establish a precedent for future emergency resupply missions. The problems began when the Meridians finally cleared enough paperwork to realize they'd been bureaucratically outmaneuvered. Their response was to send in their elite interceptor squadron. "Incoming hostiles," Rodriguez reported. "They look angry." "Well, as angry as ships can look." Elena remained calm. "Initiate protocol." "Sorry, not sorry." The convoy split into three groups, each executing maneuvers that O'Malley had sworn were theoretically possible if you didn't think too hard about physics. Maya's group led the Meridian ships on a chase through the station's maintenance corridors, their trucks somehow fitting through spaces that the laws of geometry suggested they shouldn't. Rodriguez's group engaged in what she called aggressive customer service, broadcasting an endless stream of satisfaction surveys and feedback requests to the pursuing ships. 3 Meridian vessels actually broke off pursuit to fill out the surveys, their commanders unable to resist the professionally worded requests for their valued opinion. The coup de grace came when Elena's group, loaded with their precious cargo of coffee, executed what would become known as the Grande Final. Using a combination of gravity manipulators, emergency thrusters, and what O'Malley would later insist was perfectly normal coffee-powered propulsion, they created a maneuver that looked less like a tactical retreat and more like a heavily armed coffee break. By the time the dust settled, the court had their coffee. The Meridians had somehow been scheduled for a fleet-wide customer service training seminar, and the Vixillians had officially declared the entire incident someone else's problem. Back at the human outposts, as the precious coffee was being distributed, Elena filed her official report. Under tactical observations, she wrote only, "Confirmed. Coffee is not just a beverage, it's a strategic resource. Recommend updating protocols to reflect this reality." The Korgs had once again proven that in the face of impossible odds, overwhelming opposition, and critical caffeine shortages, there was no logistics challenge they couldn't overcome through a combination of ingenuity, audacity, and extremely creative paperwork. In the years that followed, Whenever alien species discussed the human transportation core, they would speak in hushed tones about the day a coffee shortage almost started an interstellar war, and how the humans had solved it by turning bureaucracy itself into an art form. Chief Engineer Sean O'Malley stared at the cargo container that was currently floating 6 inches above the deck, occasionally flickering in and out of existence. The requisition form had listed it as 1-1, slightly unstable quantum artifact. O'Malley was beginning to think someone in requisitions had a talent for understatement. "So," Commander Patel said, watching as the container briefly turned inside out, "explain to me again why we accepted this delivery contract." O'Malley consulted his tablet, which was now displaying readings in what appeared to be 5-dimensional mathematics. "Well, according to Lieutenant Rodriguez's paperwork, we were the only ones who checked the willing to transport experimental quantum physics box on the carrier registration form. Did we have that box? We do now. The artifact, recovered from an ancient alien ruin, was needed at the Quantum Research Institute on New Mars. The problem wasn't just getting it there, it was keeping it, and their trucks, in the same dimension long enough to make the delivery." Elena assembled her core team in the briefing room of reasonable deniability, which was currently experiencing its own set of quantum problems. The coffee machine was brewing drinks that wouldn't exist until next Tuesday. "All right, people, this is officially classified as a Category Q incident, quantum uncertainty with a chance of chaos. O'Malley, what are we dealing with?" The engineer pulled up a holographic display that kept shifting between different geometric impossibilities. "The artifact is generating localized reality distortions. Anything within 20 meters tends to slide between dimensions. We've lost 3 clipboards, 2 chairs, and Private Jenkins left boot to parallel universes." "The boot came back," Lieutenant Chen added, "though it's now right-handed and seems to be made of sentient copper." Elena nodded as if this was a perfectly normal logistics challenge. "Options." O'Malley grinned. "I've modified our heavy transport vehicles with quantum stabilizers. They're basically 8-dimensional shock absorbers cobbled together from spare parts and that weird toaster we found in the Drachnid base. The one that makes toast from parallel timelines. That's the one. Though I should warn you, there's a slight chance the trucks might temporarily exist in multiple realities simultaneously." Elena considered this. In her experience, slight chance in O'Malley's vocabulary usually meant absolute certainty with bonus complications. The convoy set out at dawn, or what passed for dawn when you were dealing with quantum uncertainty. 3 heavy transport vehicles, each modified far beyond any reasonable safety standards, formed a triangle formation around the artifact container. O'Malley had dubbed it the quantum containment configuration, though Rodriguez insisted on calling it the physics violation triangle. The first sign of trouble came when Truck 2 briefly phased into a dimension where diesel fuel had evolved consciousness and formed labor unions. The resulting contract negotiations nearly stranded them in a reality where the concept of wheels had never been invented. "Status report," Elena called out as their convoy navigated through what appeared to be a section of space where the laws of physics were more like polite suggestions. "Truck 1 is currently experiencing Tuesday and Friday simultaneously," Chen reported. "Truck 2 has developed a British accent and insists on driving on the left side of reality. Truck 3, well, Truck 3 is fine, but all its cargo is turned into quantum-entangled cheese." The good news, O'Malley chimed in from his mobile workshop, which was currently orbiting its own existence, is that I figured out how to use the reality distortions to our advantage. The bad news is that I had to invent 3 new types of math to do it. Elena decided not to ask about the math. In the course, sometimes it was better not to know the details. "Can we complete the delivery?" "Oh, absolutely. We just need to synchronize our quantum phase variance with the artifact's dimensional frequency. Or in non-technical terms, we need to convince our trucks that they want to be in the same reality as our destination." What followed was perhaps the strangest logistics operation in core history. The convoy navigated through 11 different dimensions, two alternate timelines, and what appeared to be a reality where the entire universe was made of various types of pasta. Rodriguez kept meticulous records throughout the journey, though her reports began to show signs of dimensional confusion. 900 hours. Commenced delivery through quantum space. 800 hours. Completed delivery. 700 hours. Started writing this report about the delivery we haven't begun yet. The final approach to the Quantum Research Institute presented one last challenge. The artifact had begun to merge all possible delivery scenarios into one simultaneous event. The good news, O'Malley announced, is that in at least 3 quantum realities, we've already successfully delivered the cargo. The bad news is that in 2 others, we're still filling out the paperwork from last Tuesday, which hasn't happened yet. Elena made a command decision. Rodriguez, initiate protocol. Schrodinger's delivery. The protocol was brilliant in its simplicity. They would file delivery confirmation paperwork in every possible reality simultaneously, creating a bureaucratic paradox that would force the universe to accept at least one version as valid. Against all odds and several laws of physics, it worked. The artifact was delivered, though the loading dock briefly existed in 7 dimensions at once, and the delivery receipt had to be signed in ink that only existed in theoretical physics. In her final report, Elena wrote, "Mission accomplished with minimal disruption to the space-time continuum. Request additional hazard pay for quantum overtime, which technically hasn't occurred yet, but will have been happening continuously since last Thursday." The quantum cargo incident became legendary even by core standards. It was the first time a logistics operation had to be documented in nonlinear mathematics, and the only time a delivery receipt had been cited in a paper on theoretical physics. As for Private Jenkins' quantum-shifted boot, it eventually started its own transportation company in a parallel universe, specializing in delivering impossible packages through improbable realities. The Corps sent it a cease and desist letter, but only after formally recognizing it as a graduate of their advanced logistics training program. The situation on Colony Outpost Delta was dire. Surrounded by hegemony forces, their supplies dwindling, the colonists had all but given up hope. The space around the planet was so heavily blockaded that even the most optimistic military analysts had declared resupply technically, theoretically, and practically impossible. The Transportation Corps took personal offense to that assessment. "Impossible is just bad logistics with a marketing problem," Commander Elena Patel declared, studying the holographic display of the blockade. The hegemony had deployed their entire Third Fleet, over 300 warships forming a weapons grid so dense that not even light seemed eager to pass through it. Lieutenant Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Even for us, this is challenging. The hegemony's using quantum-locked targeting systems. Their weapons literally break causality to hit their targets." "Perfect," Elena smiled. "That means they're taking this seriously. Maya, what's our inventory looking like?" Lieutenant Chen pulled up their asset list. "We've still got that borrowed Drachnid stealth technology, 3 quantum-synchronized trucks from the artifact incident, and that weird probability drive O'Malley built out of spare parts, and an old gambling machine. The one that runs on mathematical impossibilities. That's the one. He says it has a 60% chance of working 300% of the time." Elena's grin widened. "Get me O'Malley. I think it's time we showed the hegemony why you should never challenge human logistics specialists to an impossible delivery." The plan they devised was, by Corps standards, relatively straightforward. They would only break about half a dozen laws of physics instead of their usual dozen. The key was the colony's location. While the space around it was blocked, the hegemony hadn't bothered to guard certain approaches they deemed suicidally impossible. O'Malley had modified their transport ships with what he called selective probability drives, engines that could basically convince reality that the impossible route was, in fact, the most logical path to take. The technology was highly experimental, mostly theoretical, and exactly the kind of thing the court specialized in. "Remember," Elena briefed her crews, "we're not trying to break through the blockade. We're just making a routine delivery through a route that happens to exist in a quantum superposition of absolutely impossible and already completed. The operation began with what Rodriguez called aggressive misdirection. She filed so many flight plans, delivery schedules, and route variations that the hegemony's tactical computers had the digital equivalent of a nervous breakdown trying to predict where they'd actually appear. The Corps convoy split into three groups. The first, led by Chen, approached the blockade head-on, broadcasting every known form of identification signal simultaneously. The hegemony computers, programmed to identify and categorize all approaching vessels, began generating error messages in 17 different languages. The second group, under Rodriguez's command, executed what they called a bureaucratic flanking maneuver. They filed for emergency delivery permits under so many different jurisdictions that several hegemony ships had to break formation just to process the paperwork. But it was Elena's group that would attempt the impossible. Using O'Malley's probability drive, they would traverse a route that existed only in theoretical physics, through the quantum foam underlying reality itself. All units, activate protocol. Special delivery. Elena commanded. The probability drives hummed to life, surrounding each ship with a field of pure mathematical improbability. What followed defied description in normal space-time terms. Elena's ships didn't so much fly as they convinced reality that they had always been on their way to their destination, were currently at their destination, and had already completed their mission, all simultaneously. The hegemony's quantum-locked weapons, designed to break causality to guarantee hits, instead found themselves targeting ships that existed in a state of quantum bureaucratic uncertainty. As one hegemony commander later described it, how do you shoot something that has already officially delivered its cargo before it began its approach? The colony's sensors detected the Corps' arrival before they departed. Their defense systems logged the delivery completion while the ships were still in transit, and the supply manifests were signed, filed, and archived across 3 temporal dimensions. When the quantum probability field collapsed and reality reasserted itself, the Corps ships were safely landed, their cargo already distributed, and their paperwork filed in triplicate across multiple timelines. The hegemony fleet was left guarding a blockade that, according to all official documentation, had never actually prevented any deliveries. In her report, Elena wrote, "Successfully completed routine delivery through standard quantum probability bypass. Request maintenance check on probability drives. Reality seems to be running about 3% more efficient than regulation standards in their vicinity." The Corps had not only completed an impossible delivery, but had done so with such thorough documentation that the hegemony was forced to officially recognize it as a legitimate logistics operation. They filed a formal protest, of course, but Rodriguez had already submitted counter-protests in advance, retroactively, and in several parallel timelines. Private Jenkins' quantum boot sent a congratulatory message from its parallel universe, though it arrived 3 days before the mission began, and was written in a language that wouldn't be invented for another century. The Galactic Council's war had dragged on for 3 decades. 17 species were locked in a conflict so complex that the official declaration of war was longer than most planets' constitutions. It was exactly the kind of situation the Transportation Corps excelled at making worse in the name of making it better. Commander Elena Patul stood before the Joint Chiefs, presenting what her team had dubbed Operation Supply and Demand Peace. "The problem isn't the war," she explained, pointing to a holographic map so complicated it required 4 dimensions to display properly. "The problem is inefficient logistics. We've analyzed their supply chains, and frankly, it's embarrassing." The generals exchanged worried looks. They'd learned that when the Corps started talking about improving other species' logistics, it usually ended with reality getting strained and diplomatic incidents becoming temporal paradoxes. "Your solution?" General Zhang asked, already reaching for his antacid tablets. Elena's smile was the kind that made insurance companies add new clauses to their policies. "We're going to fix their supply chains. All of them. Simultaneously. Whether they want us to or not." The plan was audacious even by Corps standards. They would insert themselves into every major supply line in the war, creating what O'Malley called the logistics singularity, a point where the sheer efficiency of properly managed supply chains would force peace through the power of optimized inventory management. Lieutenant Rodriguez had spent months analyzing the bureaucratic structures of all 17 warring species. "The beautiful thing about war," she explained, "is that everyone's too busy fighting to read the fine print. We filed for emergency logistics intervention rights under 37 different peace treaties that haven't been signed yet." The operation began with what appeared to be a series of random delivery errors. Corps vehicles would arrive at military installations across the galaxy, delivering supplies that hadn't been ordered to places that technically didn't exist. "But here's the clever bit," Lieutenant Chen explained. "Every mistaken delivery actually optimizes their supply chain. We're creating a logistics network so efficient that continuing the war would be less cost-effective than peace." O'Malley had outdone himself with the technical preparations. Each Corps vehicle was equipped with what he called a probability optimization field, technology that made the most efficient solution to any problem become the most likely outcome. "Think of it as weaponized common sense," he said, adjusting a device that looked like a quantum calculator having an identity crisis. "We're not forcing peace. We're just making it the most logistically sound option." The Corps deployed in what Elena officially termed a full-spectrum logistics intervention. They appeared everywhere, delivering everything, filing paperwork in quantities that threatened to achieve sentience. When the Arcturian fleet prepared to attack a Vexillian outpost, they found their ammunition had been efficiently redistributed to a peace conference they hadn't agreed to attend yet. The Meridian Consortium's latest superweapon was delayed by what appeared to be an infinite loop of delivery confirmation requests. The Corps didn't just deliver supplies. They reorganized entire supply chains, optimized resource allocation, and created such intricate networks of interdependence that firing a single shot would require filing forms in triplicate across 12 different species bureaucracies. Rodriguez's masterpiece was the Universal Resource Optimization Protocol, a document so comprehensively efficient that signing it automatically made war more expensive than peace. She had somehow made bureaucracy itself a force for harmony. The breaking point came during the Battle of Antares. As two massive fleets prepared to engage, the Corps appeared with what they claimed was routine maintenance scheduling. By the time they finished optimizing both fleets' supply chains, the two admirals were sharing coffee and complaining about paperwork. Peace didn't happen all at once. It crept in through the back door, hidden in supply manifests and inventory reports. The war didn't end with a bang or a whimper, but with a series of increasingly efficient logistics solutions that made conflict logistically impractical. In her final report to the Joint Chiefs, Elena wrote, "Operation successfully concluded. All participating species have achieved Category A logistics efficiency. War officially categorized as more trouble than it's worth by 17 different bureaucracies. Recommend immediate implementation of galaxy-wide inventory management standards to maintain peace through superior organization." The Galactic Council, faced with the most efficiently organized peace in history, had no choice but to accept it. They even awarded the Corps a commendation, though the ceremony had to be rescheduled 3 times due to optimized timeline coordination. Private Jenkins' Quantum Boot sent its congratulations, though due to a temporal filing error. The message arrived in the form of interpretive dance performed by sentient office supplies. Years later, when asked how the Transportation Corps had achieved the impossible, Elena would smile and say, "We didn't do anything special. We just treated peace like any other delivery. It's all about getting."